Before embarking on any culture change, maybe you'll want to assess the existing organisational culture first. Let's start with, why do we need to assess organisational culture? If you're going to create any kind of organisational change, whether it's a minor operational process improvement all the way up to full-on organisational transformation, then it's always going to be helpful to understand the status quo ante. What that means is the current situation, the culture of the organisation as is. This will allow you to design a project or program of change that can deliver, for example, improved employee satisfaction, enhanced employee engagement, reduced turnover, or better customer service, and therefore increased customer satisfaction. Clearly then, this is important. So what's the process for assessing organisational culture? An assessment of organisational culture involves learning about, understanding and evaluating things like shared values, beliefs and assumptions, behaviours and cultural norms within an organisation. Edgar Schein analysed organisational culture into 3 levels: artefacts, or the surface manifestations of culture, values, and underlying assumptions. These are kind of like an iceberg, with the most important levels largely hidden from view. Schein's model is an important one for project managers to understand, so let me summarise it. Artefacts are the visible surface elements of an organisation's culture, the things that any outside observer could notice. They include things like furniture, decorations, dress codes, rituals, and the stories that employees tell about their organisation. They are easy to observe, but they can be very difficult to understand, particularly if you don't conduct a deeper investigation of the culture. Often, their history is deep, meaningful, and revealing. Espoused values are the company's set of established values and norms of behaviour. They set out how things should be done and what choices we should make. Values affect how the employees will interact with one another, how they will behave, and how they will represent themselves and the organisation to the outside world. They are often reinforced by public statements of values like straplines, brandings, and statements of core organisational values. Shared basic assumptions are the bedrock of organisational culture. These are the beliefs that people take for granted and rarely question. They therefore tend to go unremarked by employees and unnoticed by outsiders. Yet they have a profound implication for all of the values, behaviours and artefacts that the organisation produces. Understanding shared assumptions will help you to explain otherwise inexplicable artefacts and values and behaviours. So now we've got some important basic theory under our belts, let's get down to the meat of how we go about assessing organisational culture. Here are 8 steps to help you craft your own assessment process. First, you need to agree the purpose of your assessment. Set down why you want to conduct your assessment of organisational culture. Maybe it's to identify areas for improvement or to align culture better with the organisation's goals, objectives and strategy. Perhaps you want to enhance employee engagement or improve customer service and satisfaction. Or maybe you'll be doing it to support another wider change initiative. Step 2 is to determine your assessment method. There are various ways to conduct an organisational culture assessment, and we'll look at those later. Select the methods that will serve your goals and fit your resources. Here, you'll need to think about things like sample size and which elements of the organisation's demographics you're going to be surveying. You might naturally default to a full cross-section of the organisation, or you might be interested in a particular part of the organisation. At step 3, you need to design your assessment. Agree the questions that you need to answer, and if you're asking the questions directly rather than observing what's going on with things like interviews, focus groups or questionnaires, you'll also need to think about the sequence of the questions. For a fully comprehensive understanding, be sure to include both qualitative and quantitative methods. I recommend you take a staged approach too. That is to say, you conduct your initial assessment with a small sample, and from what you learn from that sample, you refine your assessment process in subsequent stages. And finally, you also need to think about things like confidentiality and anonymity to ensure that you get the best and most honest responses from the people that you survey. Step 4 is easy to understand. It's where we go out and collect the data. Administer your surveys, conduct your interviews, facilitate your focus groups, and make your observations. And after that, step 5 is analysing all the data that you've collected. Here, you'll be looking for patterns, for themes, and also for discrepancies. These will be the basis for your conclusions and for your recommendations, both of what changes to make and how best to go about making them. Consider using software tools to help you with quantitative data analysis and the collation of qualitative data. This is an area where I expect AI tools will come into their own and make our data analysis and presentation much easier and more powerful. Step 6 is interpreting the results. AI may already be able to provide a first pass at interpreting the data, but I think this is where, for the foreseeable future, human beings will still be important in assessing what the data means and the conclusions we can draw from it. Identify the findings from your assessment of the culture which will support the changes you want to make and those which will hold them back. From here, you can determine the level of alignment between the current state of the organisational culture and the desired culture. And of course, you can start to understand where the misalignments lie. The penultimate step in the process is to report on your findings. Share your results with your survey's sponsors and ultimately with your stakeholders. Present your findings clearly and be sure to separate facts from interpretations. And of course, good practice means presenting the findings up front. Bluff, bottom line up front. People want to know what they want to know before they will sit through the reasoning and the process statements. Then facilitate a discussion, both to make sure that everyone in the room has a shared understanding of what you presented and also to put your findings and interpretations to the test, to subject them to a wider range of interpretations and understandings, to come up with something that everyone can agree with. Finally, the last step is to develop a plan. This is where we move from assessing organisational culture to using your assessment. So, I will stop here, knowing that you're fully familiar with the importance of setting goals and objectives, defining scope, building a schedule and a budget, and creating a plan. And of course, once you have a plan, implementing the plan and making the changes. However, do remember that assessing organisational culture is an iterative process. As soon as you make any kind of change, then you will need to go back and refine your assessment to test where you are. To fully understand your change process, you need to take continuous soundings of the culture. So, when you want to conduct an assessment of organisational culture, what are the tools you can use? Well, there are a wide variety, and I recommend that any assessment uses multiple tools. Not all of them, but you will get a deeper and better understanding if you combine several tools in your assessment process. Number one, surveys and questionnaires are perhaps the most common way to assess organizational culture. They are relatively quick and easy to develop, and they are relatively inexpensive to deploy at scale. They can produce a huge amount of data, which can, if designed properly, create quantitative information for you. The downside is that they are precise and therefore can't get at the subtle details. It's very hard to know what questions to ask so that every person can give you a clear insight into their understanding of the culture. For that, you need other methods, and the next is focus groups. Focus groups are a largely qualitative approach that allow us to get information from a small group of people at the same time. They allow you to explore in depth the kind of topics that perhaps are not well suited to detailed exploration by surveys and questionnaires. They can be expensive to run, bringing together a lot of people and needing an experienced facilitator and observers to make them work properly. However, they can be less expensive than our third approach, which is one-on-one interviews. You can carry out interviews with employees at every level and within every part of your organization. And you can select your interviewees to give you the kind of representation of the organization's demographics that you need to ensure that your survey of the culture is fully representative. These can be the best way to get a deep level of insight into the subtle topics that are not well explored by things like focus groups or questionnaires. The final two approaches don't ask people anything, they just use observation. And the first is observation of people and of behaviours. People don't often say what they do. In fact, they don't always know what they're doing. So observing what people actually do can give you very different information that complements what you learn from interviews, focus groups and questionnaires. It can often be the best way to identify unspoken cultural norms and shared values within the organisation. Make sure you observe both the way that employees interact with one another and the way that they interact with customers, clients and organisational partners. The final technique is observation of artefacts. Wander around the organisation, seeing what you see. Try to look with fresh eyes and see the things that are around the organisation. Notice everything, from the style of formal documents to the graffiti in the toilets. From the way that people leave their workspace at the end of the day to the organisation of informal spaces like kitchens and coffee lounges. Wander around and use your eyes. Take photos, make notes, and discuss what you observe with a small group of colleagues. Now, I want to end up with a quick plug, but I'm not selling you anything. I'm offering you something free. On my second channel, Management Courses, we have a full course on YouTube called The Nature of Organizations. This course is a YouTube playlist which is entirely free. So if you're interested in learning more deeply about organizations, and in particular there are around half a dozen videos documenting the main models of organizational culture, then hop over to the Management Courses YouTube channel, or indeed my Management Courses website, and take a look at the Nature of Organizations course. I'll put links in the description. Please do give this video a like if you've enjoyed it or learned from it. I'll be making loads more great project management videos for you, so please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any of them. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.